Woke extremists ruin a teenager's life, Biden and Trump team up to make us all poorer, and a TikToker explains why she's permanently banned from entering the United States. All this and so much more coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my new daily series where I cover all the craziest things on the internet and in our politics from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and don't forget to hit that like button if you are a returning viewer, and comment with your thoughts as we go along, because I'll read a couple of your comments at the end of today's show. Up first, we're talking about one of the most disturbing stories I've covered in some time. A 16-year-old in North Carolina is essentially having his life turned upside down by woke ideologues in the school system after saying something that is allegedly racist but actually isn't racist at all. We've got the details here from the Carolina Journal. A 16-year-old student at Central Davidson High School in Lexington, North Carolina was suspended for 3 days last week after using the term illegal alien during a vocabulary assignment in his English class. Leah McGee's son has a teacher who assigned vocabulary words during class last Tuesday, including the word alien. McGee says her son made an effort to understand the assignment and responded to his teacher asking, like space aliens or illegal aliens without green cards? So, sounds totally innocuous so far, right? Like an innocent question. I honestly don't see anything wrong with it, but it did not go over well. According to an email describing the incident sent to local officials and shared with Carolina Journal, a young man in class took offense to his question and reportedly threatened to fight him, prompting the teacher to call in the assistant principal. Ultimately, his words were deemed by administrative staff to be offensive and disrespectful to classmates who are Hispanic. You really think they'd be more concerned about the students trying to fight people because they heard words they don't like, something adults aren't allowed to do, and schools should be teaching kids it's not okay to do that, than with word policing a student who asked a question. And there's something darkly hilarious about claiming that the term illegal alien is actually racist against Hispanics. Because first of all, while it's not really the politically correct or fashionably way to describe it, which would be undocumented immigrant these days, illegal alien is literally a term used extensively in current active federal statutes and law governing immigration. It means the same exact thing as undocumented immigrant or whatever, and it's not an offensive term even if it's like somewhat outdated or clunky language. And most importantly, it has nothing to do with race or Hispanics. Any immigrant who comes here without authorization from any part of the world or overstays their authorization, which happens a lot too, is an illegal alien under federal law. They're the ones that inserted race into it and claimed that it referred to Hispanics, which, if you ask me, is the thing that's actually kind of problematic here. And the desire to fight people over their words. That's also not good. I didn't make a statement directed towards anyone. I asked a question, said the student in response to his suspension. I wasn't speaking of Hispanics because everyone from other countries needs green cards, and the term illegal alien is an actual term that I hear on the news and can find in the dictionary. He's completely right, and it's crazy that you would suspend a kid over using a word that is used on the news and is used in the law and is in the dictionary just like normal. I mean, it's crazy. But here's where the story gets really, honestly, really up. In addition to the 3-day suspension, his record could be damaged as he aims to secure an athletic scholarship for college. He is actively involved in school clubs, track, and cross country. Because of his question, our son was disciplined and given 3 days out of school suspension for, quote, racism, wrote his mother in the email. He is devastated and concerned that the racism label on his school record will harm his future goal of receiving a track scholarship. We are concerned that he will fall behind in his classes due to being absent for 3 consecutive days. This is really messed up because that label on his record could absolutely create huge problems for his future, all over something where he did nothing wrong and there were no actual victims. For me, it's a good example of how hyper-woke progressivism doesn't actually often advance social justice, but instead perpetuates its own injustices. I also don't even understand this approach if he had said something that was racist, which, to be clear, he didn't. Still, you'd think that it could be a learning opportunity, that they could explain to him why what he said wasn't okay, he could apologize to classmates, and only if he refused to change and kept being, racially offensive to other classmates or something, would you move down the pathway of suspension. But just because somebody said something offensive once in class, to actually suspend them from school and potentially ruin their future with a racism label on their record seems like an insane overreaction and not actually how you would promote tolerance and learning and growth. I mean, do we really want a system that just cancels and rips up the future of 16-year-olds who use one awkward or outdated phrase? I really worry that in pockets of the country, the education system is being hijacked by ideological progressives. A system run by sane, non-ideological, normal people who, regardless of their politics, would never do this kind of a thing. And I know there's still so many good teachers and principals and people out there in the public school system and throughout the country, but I worry that the next generation that's coming up has this kind of illiberal, extreme activist mindset, at least some of them do, and that they're getting into positions of power and influence and then doing really disturbing things with them. I'm not sure what the answer is, to be honest, but I do know that this just further affirms my belief that we need universal school choice. If I was the parent of another kid in this school system, I would not want my kid trapped in a school where administrators think it's okay to ruin kids' lives over fake, non-existent controversies that don't even exist outside of their own bizarre ideological hang-ups. But what do you guys think? Is this kid being screwed over by a woke system, or am I missing something? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying this episode. Up next, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are actually agreeing on something for once, but of course, it's something that's going to screw over the American people and make us all poorer. You know, when I first entered politics, I kind of held on to this naive notion that a lot of people have that bipartisanship, when Republicans and Democrats come together, is a good thing, an inherently good thing. And it still can be. Don't get me wrong. However, a lot of the time when the Republicans and the Democrats are agreeing on something, it's actually a good sign we're about to get screwed over. The Patriot Act, for example, was one of the most bipartisan laws after 9/11, and they voted away our constitutional rights and expanded mass surveillance. Many times, when both parties' establishments can agree on something, it's actually because there's special interests at play, and they're hoping the voters won't realize that what they're doing is actually not in their best interests. And the story we have today is a perfect example of that. So if you remember, back when President Trump was in office, he instituted big tariffs, which are taxes imposed on imports, things coming into the country. And these tariffs were on things like steel and aluminum and solar panels and washing machines and a bunch of other consumer goods. This was described as a trade war, and it was, because it prompted massive retaliation tariffs from other countries. At the time, Trump doing this was an aberration in US politics. Before that, there had been something of a consensus around the idea of freer trade, letting people buy and sell things all over across the world so that people can have the most efficient economies and the most affordable goods. But despite claiming to oppose Trump, Biden has kept in place almost all of Trump's tariffs. And now more revenue has actually been extracted from the American people under these tariffs under Biden than ever was taken out of our wallets under Trump. A new analysis from the Tax Foundation shows that of the $233 billion collected from these tariffs from the American people, just $89 billion was collected during the Trump administration. The remaining $144 billion has been collected during the Biden administration. They note that while political rhetoric claims the tariffs have been paid by China and other foreign countries, they are actually paid by people in the US importing foreign goods. And the economic burden of those higher tax payments has fallen almost exclusively on American consumers in the form of higher import or retail prices. I want you guys to really think about this for a second. Over the last few years, we've experienced a cost of living crisis in America. Americans can't afford groceries. They can't afford gas. They are struggling to pay their bills, and inflation has just made it harder and harder to keep up. And all the while, Republicans and Democrats came together to take $233 billion out of Americans' pockets, all in pursuit of protecting special interests in the steel industry or the aluminum industry or other well-favored special interests. And the research overwhelmingly shows that the tariffs had a net negative effect on the economy. So the whole argument that they were going to protect American jobs and help our economy didn't even pan out. Yet despite all of that, they impose this tremendous cost on all Americans while we can least afford it. They have this policy that makes prices much higher during a time where we have a cost of living crisis. And both Biden and Trump still completely support it. This system is broken. These people do not have our best interests at heart, and they are not making policy that's in the best interest of the American people. But what do you think? Do you support the tariff somehow? I want to know your perspective, so do let me know in the comments, and do hit the like button if you found this segment interesting. Now it's time for our segment, Delulu Epidemic, where I call out the people who are letting their stupid show. Today we've got a tweet where somebody claims that dogs in large cities are essentially settler colonial, a way for their owners to move into and occupy more of the urban space than they are allotted, while making it everyone else's problem. Huh? Another person tweeted, dogs should be banned from cities. Inevitably, they always oversaturate patches of grass with urine, and it smells awful. Nobody talks about urine saturation. Whole blocks just smell like piss permanently, but it's the big issue with dog ownership. Are some people really this delulu? I'm telling you right now, this is why we have a Second Amendment. Because these people can take our dogs out of our cold, dead hands. And we will have an uprising before we let Twitter Karens take away our beloved pets. It's all just so stupid, too. I mean, goodness sake. I live in a small city in the Midwest, and everybody has dogs and is walking them around all the time, and none of our streets or our grass smell like urine. The reason that the streets smell like urine in New York City or other places is probably because of homeless people, not dogs. And the idea that dogs are settler colonialist because you don't, what does that even mean? You take up more space with them. Your dog lives in your home. You walk around a lot, I guess, and you pee on trees, but you're not occupying space. You're just moving through it and existing in public. I guess some people just hate fun, hate joy, hate freedom, and so they want to take it away from everybody else. And to them I say, your Delulu is showing. Alright, up next, it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my segment where I react to the craziest and cringiest videos from the Clock app. Today, a TikToker explains why she's been permanently banned from entering the United States. Buckle up, because it's a real trip.
I am permanently banned from entering the United States, so today I'm going to tell you guys the full story. So for a bit of context, I am a Canadian citizen, born and raised in Canada. Growing up, we would go to the United States like at least twice a year. In 2013, I lived in the United States for a year to go to ballet school. And then in 2014, I moved to Copenhagen, and in 2015, I moved to Germany. The story starts in 2016. I was working at the time as a fine art nude model, and I was hired by a Danish photographer to do a road trip throughout Utah and Nevada to take photos for his new book that he was working on. So I decided to visit a couple other cities while I was there as well. I planned to visit Vegas, San Francisco, and Seattle after our road trip. When I arrived at my first layover in the States and I went through border control, they asked me what I did for a living and why I was visiting the States. I said, I'm a model and I'm just visiting as a tourist to see some new places and visit friends.
Hang on. So you lied? Because didn't you just say you were coming here to do a photo shoot, like professionally? So you went through border security to enter the United States and you lied to them. I'm not sure that's something I would recommend, and getting in trouble seems like a natural result of that, to be honest. But let's see where this goes, I guess.
They pulled me into secondary questioning, and I was taken into a small, cold interrogation room. The door was locked, and I was told that I could potentially face a $50,000 fine or up to 5 years in prison. So I was getting stressed out. They started questioning me, but I was sticking with my story that I wasn't going to be actually working during my trip because I was committed and wanted to make the trip happen still. They interrogated me for 2 hours, and during this time, they went through my luggage, which they had pulled from check. And they also went through my entire phone. And yes, legally, United States Border Control can do that.
Okay, I do find it kind of disturbing that Border Patrol just has the right to search your phone like that. But I mean, I guess if you're not a U.S. citizen, I certainly wouldn't want them to be able to do that to U.S. citizens. But maybe for security that's necessary. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with that, to be honest, the government having that kind of power.
So in my luggage, they found my agenda where I had written down my plans for all of the photo shoots I had been booked for. And when they searched through my phone, they also found out that I was a corn performer.
Oh my God. So she lied about not working. She lied to try to sneak into the US to do work without a permit. And she lied, but she had paperwork exposing her lie in her luggage. Baby girl, if you're gonna do crime, at least be smarter about it than this.
I was supposed to shoot with Owen Gray when I was in San Francisco. If you know, you know. So I was still trying to say that the photo shoots were not paid, I wasn't officially working, and then they asked for the password for my Model Mayhem account and for my email account. And legally, I had to give those to them if I still wanted to enter the United States. So at that point, I just broke down crying. I was so terrified that I was going to be put in prison or fined. And I said, like, yes, I know that I've messed up and I was trying to work without a visa and I don't want to enter anymore. Like, please don't put me in prison. For those of you in the comments who are gonna say, like, why didn't you just get a work visa? A work visa would have cost me around $10,000, which is a lot more than I was even gonna make on that trip. So at this point, I was so emotionally broken down. I had been interrogated for 2 hours and they were continuing to ask me questions and I was just answering everything super honestly because I was so scared. One of the questions they asked me is if I had ever done S work. And at the time, I had been a sugar baby in the past, so I told that to them. And that is considered S work. So they finished up the interrogation and they told me that they were banning me from the United States for 5 years, and the ban included flight layovers, and I was to be immediately deported.
Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh because this is like serious business. But girl, it kind of sounds like you just played stupid games and won stupid prizes. You tried to break the law and come to the US without a work permit, which I do think should be cheaper and easier to get if you're doing legitimate work, which I guess that's a whole nother can of worms, whether S work counts as that. But you tried to lie and pull a fast one on our border security, and then you got caught because you didn't do it very well, and then you got banned for 5 years. I mean, I guess I just don't know what else you expect.
So now you're thinking, okay, a 5-year ban is not a permanent ban, but that part is coming. I was then escorted by 2 heavily armed guards to my flight gate, and I was not allowed to hold my own passport or my own documents. Like, they gave me printed out documents of my entire interrogation record and that I was an illegal alien and all about my deportation and ban. So when it's time to board my flight, the armed guards that I'm with hand my passport and my paperwork to the flight attendant and they tell him, you cannot give this to her until you leave American airspace. So the flight attendant was scared of me. I assume he thought I was a criminal. And also the funny thing was the only remaining seat on the plane they put me on was in first class. The one and only time I've sat in first class was when I was being deported by the United States government. So thanks for that. A little while later, I spoke to a lawyer about the situation because I wanted to know if I could appeal the ban. And my lawyer said that I could appeal it, but it would be a very expensive process with a very low chance of actually working.
That is actually bad and not fair. There should be an affordable and reasonable and expedited process to appeal stuff like this. Just like if people get put on the no-fly list, it's like really hard for them to get off of it. It's not good, right? If you're taking drastic steps against people that they don't have a chance to appeal it fairly. But what would her appeal be? You literally did exactly what they said you did, and these are the consequences for it. What would the appeal be? I'm not getting it.
And I also found out that United States border agents have the right to detain and deport you if they suspect that you have done S work at all in the last 10 years, even if you've done it in a country where it's completely legal and even if you have no intentions of doing it in the United States.
Okay, that does seem unfair to me. If you did it in a country where it's legal, why should that be held against you? I don't get it.
My lawyer told me that after my 5-year ban was up, I could try to re-enter the United States. But if the border agent I was speaking to dug into my files and saw on my interrogation record that I had answered yes to the S work question, they could deny me entry just based on that. This January, I decided that I wanted to start doing S work full time and that I was going to have a public social media presence and I wasn't going to be doing it anonymously. And I knew that by deciding this, I was essentially giving myself a permanent ban on entering the United States, which isn't the worst place to be banned from, but you know, I've never been to New York and I have friends that live there and I would love to go someday. The United States has the strictest border control laws in the world when it comes to S workers because they do not care if you've only done S work in a place where it's completely legal. There are so many awful stories from S workers who have had much more traumatizing experiences than I did at border control just because of the type of work they do. And this is why on websites of providers who work internationally or agencies, they will often say that they travel worldwide except for the United States.
All right, guys, I think I'm going to have to enter this one under the category of around and find out. Like, I don't really think that this woman needs to be banned from the US. I personally have a pretty libertarian view towards S work, by which she means sex work. And while I don't personally approve of it, I don't think we need to be putting people in jail over it. But that said, I just have a hard time feeling sympathy for people when they do stupid things without thinking through the consequences and without even taking basic steps to avoid getting caught, and then want to talk about it as if it's this grand injustice that's been done to them because of the happenstance of their profession. Like, no, I mean, you just did something dumb and tried to break the law and get away with it and got caught. I have basically zero sympathy for her, but I don't know. Am I missing something, guys? Let me know in the comments what you think and if you're on her side or whatnot. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts. Now, let's round out the show by reading a few of your comments from the last episode. One person says, in reference to the new NPR CEO talking about folks, F-O-L-X for gender neutral, is it just me, or is folks just as gender neutral as folks with an X? You know, I didn't think about that, but that's a really good point. They're at the point, the woke people are at the point where they're coming up for woke gender neutral terms for terms that are already gender neutral. Another person said, what? She's not supposed to have political opinions? Cut the crapola. No, of course she can have political opinions. What she can't do is be openly partisan and have extreme views about hating one side and then be a CEO of a taxpayer-funded, nonpartisan news institution. This is like just journalism 101. That's why if you go to the feeds of any reporters at big outlets, at least maybe this isn't the case anymore, but for a long time, you wouldn't see their opinions anywhere. Another person says, the dictionary is not a choose your own adventure game, LOL, gold. Yeah, I think that might need to be one of my new catchphrases, because I think that people are just making up words and redefining shit all the time, and it's got to stop. Another person said, I don't think you look like a third grade boy who plays soccer, but you definitely look like you were really into soccer in elementary school, but stopped playing in middle school and joined band instead. Bruh. Read me for filth, I guess. Ouch. I'll have you know, I wasn't in band. But no shade to the band kids, a lot of y'all turned out pretty cool. Another person said, I would love to know what Brad's height and weight is. Why? Why would you like to know that? I guess I'll just keep you guessing. I'm a mysterious man. Alright guys, that's it for this episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my new daily series. Make sure you're subscribed and maybe even turn on those bell notifications so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to like and comment with your thoughts. And with that, I'll see you all next time.